Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar news update video. So, we've got more Avatar Studios rumors here to talk about. So, the first one is very interesting because I don't really know what to make of this one. It's odd, it's different, it feels a little bit different than a lot of the other ones we've got because it's very specifically about like a bunch of characters like will be featured in one of these shows, but one of these movies or show, but they are not going to be like the focus, but they'll be an important like kind of plot element. And what do you make of that? Because it's like a cross-era type thing, and what do you do with that? So the exclusive is Kyoshi, Rangi, Yoon, and more from the Kyoshi novels will appear in Avatar Studios' first movie or show. So that gets clarified down here. Will have substantial roles in Avatar Studios' first animated movie and or show. Again, either of the 2025 projects. Now, currently we don't have details on which of them it will be. According to Avatar News, he's saying a solid guess is perhaps the show, him using the logic of Earth Avatar connection. That's going to be what happens. But obviously the adult gang movie could easily have a Kyoshi related plot point as well. And you know, it also is technically possible that the Kyoshi characters are for a later project, but the production timeline strongly favors one of the first year projects. In both cases, these are almost guaranteed to be flashbacks, visions, etc., which doesn't make sense. And then interestingly in brackets, and based on some other details I can't share yet, I'm fairly confident this isn't for a Kyoshi movie or show itself. I'm wondering if that is that he might be able to confirm in like the coming weeks what the 2027 show is to end the kind of slate for the first 3 years. That's like the only mysterious one on the kind of first year's slate, given that it seems like we're going to get movie show in each of the first 3 years. It's just that last show that we don't actually know about. So if the Kyoshi movie or show isn't that last project, that means it's after the first 3 years. So probably these characters wouldn't be still being talked about at play within Avatar Studios this early on, unless they were having some sort of a more significant involvement in one of the projects that is coming sooner. This is definitely one of them where I really wish he would just flat out sort of like put in what specifically he was told, because there's a lot of text here and it's sort of unclear what exactly he was told versus how much of this is him sort of speculating and placing the exclusive news himself. Like, is it just these characters, basically novel characters, will appear in one of the first two, or is there something else? Because, you know, him mentioning like the production timeline, when like, how does that relate to things? We don't even really know what the production timeline is. Now, obviously this is where you assume that the reason this has come to light is because the source is someone within Avatar Studios, and if they are seeing Kyoshi stuff still getting talked about here as they're properly jumping into production on these first couple of projects, it only makes sense that those characters are still in play if they're going to be involved in one of those two stories. So he goes on and talks about the whole controversy about, you know, him reporting on exclusive, you know, Kyoshi related news, because it's technically one of these times where it was sort of proven to be wrong. Now, I think a lot of people make a lot out of this, the fact that he said the first movie would be Kyoshi when it actually got confirmed to be Aang. But it's like he's doing early reporting, early like leaked insider information reporting on the early stages of production on multiple projects. Of course, some of his earliest news is going to turn out to be wrong as they finally solidify and lock in what they're actually going to do. So I've never had too big of a problem with this, because to me, when you're talking about this news, you just have to take it as it is early leaked insider rumored information. It is not confirmed. It is interesting to talk about because otherwise we would have nothing to talk about with Avatar Studios, but you have to treat it as existing in this weird kind of like middle ground between kind of confirmed and like completely like unconfirmed. And that's just the way you have to do it. So that's why I don't get too upset about oh, this stuff was kind of confirmed to be wrong or anything like that. It's just kind of being, I think, needlessly kind of mean online. When without Avatar news as news, like, where would we be as a fandom for the last couple of years is how I view it. So finally, let's get into some speculation here. So how are the Kyoshi characters going to involve themselves in either the adult gang movie that's going to be when like Aang is 24 and all of this stuff? It's the movie that is potentially called Echoes and Aftershocks. It's the movie that's potentially called Hidden Kingdom. Or how are the Kyoshi characters going to be somehow involved in some way in the Earth Avatar After Korra show? So straight away, I want to say about the Earth Avatar After Korra. I think it's very difficult to speculate on that because, one, it hasn't been officially confirmed to be the first show secondary project. We have to acknowledge that. The only fully confirmed one is the adult gang movie. But do keep in mind, 2 other movies are also confirmed. 3 movies is for sure a thing that is happening with this studio. It's just we don't actually have official information on the shows just yet. The other thing is obviously that we have nothing to go on with the Earth Avatar. Beyond that, theoretically, it is the Avatar After Korra, and so we get a rough sense for where the era might be, and stuff like Avatar News alludes to there, the Earth Avatar connection. But even then, this Avatar will not have past life connections to avatars before Korra, as far as we are aware, as we all know well. Now, he could still, from history, basically, learning about history books and certain characters theoretically, he could find out about Kyoshi in a way where we would get an actual full-on flashback involving the characters. There are ways to do this that don't necessarily have to just be flashbacks informed entirely by the past life avatar spiritual connection. There, you can do that. Other shows can do it without the crazy spiritual connection. Avatar can do just normal flashbacks if you need to. The question is obviously like, how is that going to happen? Because obviously when you're talking about that Avatar, you're talking about quite a gap between Kyoshi's era and that Avatar's era, where we're theoretically maybe going a little bit futuristic, or at the very least pretty high levels of technology for that era. So beyond just saying that, like, it's obviously, it remains a possibility that this is where it happens, I would just be slightly hesitant just because there would be a few factors getting in the way of like how you could actually focus these characters in this era. The adult gang movie is an interesting one where, like, you know, it's a way to do it. It's to certainly have these sort of lingering issues in a way from a past Avatar's era affect the era of a current Avatar. That's always a classic way to start a story for Avatar. And it's a good way to sort of, I suppose, jump back in. And, you know, it's acknowledging in a way that people miss the past lives. So having Aang have to sort of seek out Kyoshi to get information on what's going on seems like a fantastic way to do things. Because, you know, Aang has focused a lot of his kind of past life stuff on, you'd say, Roku quite a bit. There's even a little bit of the kind of like Umi stuff with Aang in his spiritual connections. Yang Chen, of course, the Air Nomad connection is quite nice. So you'd say that in a way, Kyoshi of the kind of like his group of past avatars, the initial ones before him, is maybe the one he needs to have a little bit more of a more concrete, you know, relationship, more of a story focused on it. Because even the Chin the Conqueror stuff from Avatar Day was very much a like contrasting the humorous situation Aang is in versus how serious it was for Kyoshi in the past, and not too much else. So it would be nice to get a more kind of like character focused, you know, Kyoshi and Aang discussing kind of events, kind of plot. And it could relate to some of the stuff that's going on here. So Echoes and Aftershocks, that feels just like a title, somewhat Earth related already. And then Hidden Kingdom also feels somewhat Earth related, relating to old Earth Kingdom stuff, kingdoms from the past, and so on. And so going back to an Earth avatar like Kyoshi to explore some of this stuff does make sense. So, what are some potential ideas from the novels? The return of Father Glowworm is obviously something you could theoretically do. With Yoon's death, you assume all of Glowworm's energy should now kind of be dispersed, and he should be able to be kind of reformed in a new form as a spirit once again, because spirits never truly die. So there's nothing to suggest that Glowworm is gone for good. So that's one way to do things, would be like Aang dealing with Glowworm. Not sure, maybe that's perhaps what they're gonna go for. That might be a little bit of a stretch. One thing that I think is maybe a little bit more likely to happen, and that would be that one of the big things, especially Rise of Kyoshi introduced, was the idea of the Dao Fei. This kind of more intricate, detailed exploration of what basically like the bandits and pirates, at least some groups of bandits and pirates in the world, what they are like, and that there is a culture to them more than just being thugs. They have a unique sense of honor. And we've seen groups of bandits in Avatar and Korra, but never explored in the same way that they were in the Kyoshi books, when this was a huge thing in the Earth Kingdom. Like, it was a major problem in Kyoshi's era, the effect that the various Dao Fei groups had on the world. And the fact that, Kyoshi herself is Dao Fei, Rangi is part of one of these groups as well. And a lot of the characters there were kind of focused on kind of like dealing with, basically Dao Fei in the past. So Janju, of course, Yellow Neck Uprising. Yoon basically involved in like negotiating with pirates like Tagaka and the Fifth Nation. Even Kelsang, like having that history of like gaining his legendary kind of moniker from effectively also having to deal with pirates as well. That would be a very obvious thing to do. What if this is sort of the introduction of like the Dao Fei concept in the ATLA era, and he talks to past avatars to try and find out more about what exactly is the whole Dao Fei thing. And that's a way to immediately go to Kyoshi and be like, I was Dao Fei. I dealt heavily with them in my era, and that's a way to cover, in a way, part of the story of Rise of Kyoshi, some of the backstory presented in Rise of Kyoshi, to present all of that. Now, it is interesting that it does mention like Rangi and Yoon by name. Now, again, this is where I would really like to know very specifically what the actual like communication to Avatar News was that informs this post. Like, was he just told Kyoshi and has assumed Rangi and Yoon, or was he specifically told Kyoshi, Rangi, Yoon, and more as like a direct quote? Because it makes sense. Like, Rangi is going to be involved in Kyoshi's life. That makes complete sense. But Yoon is interesting because he is actually separated and like from the others for like quite a lot. So what story would directly involve Yoon? Now, it could be something about like what happened during the kind of era when he was the Avatar, basically. There's a time period there where he was doing stuff and forming all these deals that Kyoshi might have found out about later that she could relate to Aang. That's one way to involve things that way. Otherwise, it's like, well, the glowworm stuff would definitely prompt the inclusion of Yoon, because that's the kind of foundation of like where a lot of that power kind of comes from. So there's a way to do it there. Shadow of Kyoshi stuff is more Fire Nation focused, and you're focusing on sort of the kind of fire kind of families, the important families in the Fire Nation, and the different fire islands and stuff like that, the clans. There's a way to do it like there, where one of those is like a hidden kingdom, Bonte Island. You do stuff like that would relate to some of the kind of Nyatha stuff, but that's a little bit more Karuk focused rather than maybe Kyoshi specifically. So I kind of feel like I'm maybe leaning like, is it going to be more of the Rise of Kyoshi stuff? I think is probably the better way to do this, the better way to think about this. Dao Fei to me feels like a topic that could come up, because what if we do get a place that's like an expanded Hujiang, which in the Rise of Kyoshi was basically an outlaw town that was basically run by Dao Fei. It was a Dao Fei town. What if we expand that to become like a Dao Fei kingdom of sorts that rises up at a similar time as, you know, Republic City is rising up, and it needs to sort of be dealt with. That's one way to create an issue, and getting the information from Kyoshi is a way to know how to kind of deal with them. That, like, maybe don't fully just treat them as thugs and stuff like that, but that, like, they have a sense of honor, and just kind of teaching them a little bit more of a way how to approach the situation there. Maybe it, like, could relate to, like, you know, maybe the Flying Opera Company is somehow, like, still around in some form or another, and it involves that. Like, is there a way we could involve Lao Ge, Tiaguai the Immortal, in stuff going on here? That's a way to do a big potential, like, gray villain type character of, like, what if he gets reintroduced, still alive, and Aang needs to know more about this guy, and Kyoshi, of course, is the character who knows about this guy. That's one way to do things, and you maybe resolve Tiaguai or Lao Ge's plot in that way. There are things you can do. Like, there's probably a bunch of other avenues that I haven't even mentioned here that you could do. But right now, I would definitely lean towards, at least to me, the Aang movie feels like the maybe more likely one. I think the counterpoint to that is that the first movie is the reintroduction of Avatar. It's the re-debut of Avatar. We want that to be, in a way, almost like very focused on the ATLA characters, so they get their chance to shine as adults, in that, like, how many times will we get to see them in these designs as adults? Do we want that movie to potentially be overly detailed with, like, we get the new characters at this age, plus Kyoshi, plus all this other stuff on top of things? That might make for a very kind of packed movie when we want the depth. So, you know, maybe leaving some sort of Kyoshi legacy thing for the next Avatar after Korra is one way to do it. But you also, one thing I think you do need, and this is, I brought this up many times, is that it's sort of difficult to, off the top of your head, come up with an immediately super strong plot for what this movie, like, could be. So, you know, having the legacy of a past Avatar come back up to create a plot for Aang is a good way to do things. And, you know, it says substantial roles, but that could just mean, like, a somewhat extended backstory, like 10-minute focus backstory on Kyoshi. That's still a substantial role, because Kyoshi is, like, a main character for a full sequence potentially in the movie, plus 1 or 2, 3, you know, times Aang talking to a past life. There are ways to kind of, like, do that while fitting all of these things. So I'm wondering if what this has actually come from is perhaps the idea of, like, is this the casting for, like, Kyoshi kind of coming up? Because wasn't that, like, a rumor from, like, a while ago that, like, somehow casting had already begun for some sort of Kyoshi project? Well, if you consider, like, the Kyoshi, like, flashback sequence in one of these shows as being almost its own separate thing, well, maybe that's what they're doing, because we're already hearing little bits and pieces about casting, and this is another kind of side of that. So interesting stuff, for sure. But that's that. And then just a little bit of a random one. I didn't expect to see this at all, but apparently we already have some international dates for the first movie. So, of course, October 10th, I think, is the date we initially have. This is the USA date, what it was first announced as. It's what you will be judging, like, if you're getting it early or late off. So USA is getting it here, same time as Canada and Poland. But interestingly, Belgium get it on the 8th of October. Austria, Brazil, Czech Republic, Germany, Hungary, and Slovakia will be getting it on the 9th. France, 5 days afterwards on the 15th. Turkey, 2 weeks later. And then a lot of other countries are left out. So for me, I'm obviously thinking about, like, Ireland and perhaps the UK being rolled into that as well. The countries I'd be looking at in relation to that would probably be the likes of, like, France, Germany, and Belgium, but you can see there's a quite broad scope between that here. And then you assume for a lot of these other countries it's going to be an airing in, like, the country's own language as well. So might we just get it with the USA on the 10th, which is English-speaking countries? or is it going to be more specific kind of region type thing where we're just included on like the 9th or 8th? I think that's the way a lot of Marvel movies tend to work, where like we get it like a couple of days, maybe a week before America with some of the Marvel movies. So it might be something along those lines. But for the most part, apart from probably really Turkey, it seems like a lot of the dates are actually quite close together. But it's nice to be getting that information, to know that like we're actually kind of getting some of this stuff. It's beginning to happen. So beyond that, again, just to highlight, we are in March. There is sort of an expectation that we might get the reveal of the second Yang Chen book this month. There's really very little to go on, apart from we just hope to at some point come across the announcement of that this month. I hope it happens. I think we do really need that book. Otherwise, we are just waiting for news about like pretty much everything to just hit and come out. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on some international release dates for the first movie. And also a very interesting idea that it seems like there will be Kyoshi content early in Avatar Studios, but perhaps not as its own project. Featured likely as some sort of a big flashback vision kind of plot detail in one of the first 2 projects. Which one do you think it is? And what sort of stuff do you think from the novels and from Kyoshi do you think they will use to incorporate into the Aang movie or the Earth Avatar movie? Definitely want to know what your guys' speculations are on this. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.